Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome musical treasure and the preeminent violinist of our time, Itzhak Perlman.
It was November of 1995, and Itzhak Perlman had just been introduced to a very fortunate audience at Lincoln Center. And as he always did, he would take that wonderful violin of his and he'd just put it on his shoulder and chin, and he'd raise his bow, he'd look at his conductor, nod, and he would begin. Bang! A gunshot. It sounded like a gunshot. The sound was unmistakable. It was in the first 30 seconds of his piece. It was unmistakable. Everyone in the audience knew what the sound was. Everyone knew. Everyone knew what needed to be done. Of course, a string had broken. And of course, everyone knew that he needed to change his violin. Well, that night in Lincoln Center, Itzhak Perlman refused to know that fact, that he had to change his violin. Everyone said, everyone knew that you can't play symphony-level music on 3 strings, and Itzhak Perlman refused to know that as well. He didn't change his violin. He just composed himself. He closed his eyes. It was almost as if he was recalibrating. And he put that violin back to his shoulder and chin, and he raised that bow again, and he nodded to the conductor, and they continued from where he left off. And he played with such passion, such power, such purity. The audience had never heard anything like this before. So of course when he finished the piece, they erupted. I mean, they went wild. The applause was thunderous. And he just smiled. And he wiped his brow. And he said, you know, sometimes it's the artist's task to find out how much music you can make with what you have left. To find out how much music you can make with what you have left. Instead of focusing on the broken string, Itzhak Perlman chose to work with what he had left, the 3 strings he had left. The broken string is a tremendous metaphor for business, frankly, for leadership, frankly. And it's amazing that we learn this valued principle from the maestro himself. It's such a great metaphor. If we focus on the broken string and stay focused on the broken string, as so many businesses and business leaders are doing today, then eventually we begin to believe the broken string. Eventually we begin to believe that we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources, that we've tried it before, that our boss doesn't know what he's doing, that the people in headquarters are all confused. We start to believe in the broken string eventually. 2 great examples. We call it the 2 Al's. Well, I was riding in a car on my way to the airport, and Al 1, the owner of the limo service that was driving me, said, on the way back, if you don't mind, I'd like to spend some time with you because I have a question. We've had 2,200 people who've used our service from any given point in time in our little small community, and I'd like your advice on how to attract the 24,000 that have never used my service. And there it was. Al 1 was focused on the broken string. His broken string was what he didn't have. He was focused on what he didn't have. I said, Al, there's no need for us to meet. What your challenge is to not focus on the broken string. Focus on what you have. Focus on the 2,200 people that have used your service. Love them. Nurture them. Work with them, and they'll refer you to all the customers you can possibly handle. Well, some months later, Beverly and I were in a limo or a car driving from the Denver airport to our hotel where I would speak the next day at a company sales meeting. And Al, too, took the opportunity to share with us a story about how he had owned a shoe shine stand some 25 years earlier in one of the Denver hotels. And one of his very best customers he had stayed in very close contact with for 25 years. And it turned out that, that this very best customer was the vice president of sales for the company that we were speaking for the next day. So when Al, he had nurtured that relationship so well, when Al started his limousine service, the head of sales made sure that Al had a contract, exclusive contract for the transportation rights for that company in Denver, and he had an exciting business as a result of it because Al, too, focused on what he had, the relationship, and he nurtured it, and he didn't worry about what he didn't have, ever. The trick here is always to focus on the three strings, to focus on what we have, and not focus on the broken string, or as we call it, the BS. So how do you do that? How do you yourself and your organization stay focused on what you have? Well, we've got a couple of tips for you. So you would begin, it's important for you to begin by, first of all, clearly identifying your broken string. Make sure you, and we all have one, or two, or three, clearly identify what it is that's holding you back. And if we spend some time with it, we know what's holding us back, either from being successful at all or from taking our business to the next level. Clearly identify that. The second thing that I'd like you to do, the second activity, is to clearly identify what your three strings are. Those 3 assets, or 5 assets, or 10 assets. And some of you may actually have to make a list, because it's important for you to know and share with the people around you what you want to be focused on, how you want to be focused on, and your assets, your 3 strings, so that you can make music like Itzhak Perlman. And then people will say, well, how do I do that? How do I really stay focused on that? Well, the last tip, this is a beaut. This is an elastic band, a real thick elastic band. I hope you can see it. You can get it at any office supply store, I'm sure. Get real thick elastic bands and put them on your wrist. Now, this works, I'm telling you here. Follow with me. Stay with me here. Every time you catch yourself participating in a broken string conversation, I want you to snap that elastic band here. Snap that elastic band hard so that you feel it. Every time you catch someone in your organization participating in a broken string conversation, snap that elastic band as a reminder that you ought to be focused on the 3 strings, on the assets. Carry a supply of these elastic bands with you in your pocket. And every time you hear someone participating in a broken string conversation, hand out the elastic bands as a reminder that our organization is not focused on broken strings, but on the 3 strings that help us make music with what we have left. Enough for now. We'll see you on the next video. Be well and be contagious.